Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Stress Podcast 2022. It's the very first time I have some beautiful podcast guests on the show, and I'm super excited to do a three-way podcast interview this morning with Abbe and Maggie. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. We're so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. The Anxiety Sisters is what they call you as well. So I'm really excited to talk with you today about anxiety, about panic attacks. I don't even know where to start, but I think maybe to kind of ease ourselves into the topic, we'll just start with the really simple introductions of each of you so we get to know each other a little bit better. Abbe, why don't you start?
Okay, so my name is Abbe Greenberg. And the folks in our community tend to call me Abs, but I really respond to anything because I'm a parent, so I'm used to responding to so many different names. And I am a professor of communication by trade. However, at this point, I am a full-time anxiety sister. So Mags and I, as of 2017, decided to go full-time in terms of running our community, which it started with two of us and now has, I think 217,000 is our latest number that I saw.
That's incredible. And where are you located, Abs?
I am in New Jersey, central New Jersey.
Okay.
So I have a lot of snow on the ground.
Very nice. Yeah, you just had a snowstorm last weekend.
Yeah.
And what were you up to this morning?
So Mags and I did our usual early morning Monday meeting on East Coast time. So we start early in the morning and plan everything we're doing for the week and talk about, we were on a support group on Sunday night, so we debrief them from that. And then we each go do our research. And I was reading neuroscience this morning. That was my activity until the podcast.
Very nice. Great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction and welcome. I'm really excited to chat with you. Max, how about you?
Hi, yes, I'm Maggie Sarachek. And like Abbe, I'm an anxiety sister full time. I am trained in social work. That's what my graduate school was in. And so I've worked in a variety of capacities in social work. And then, Abs and I started this community. And as we got more into it, it started taking more and more of our time and resources and energy. And so now we are both here full time.
Yeah. Amazing. And where are you located?
I'm located in Columbus, Ohio, and I am I'm a New York City girl. I grew up on Long Island and lived in New York City for many, many years. And about 9 years ago, we moved to Columbus. Probably couldn't have found it on a map before we moved here. We're not.
Okay.
And moved here for a job for my husband, which he left after a couple of years, but we kind of put down some roots and stayed. So I'm sort of, out of my element in certain ways, but it's also been a really good change for us as a family.
Very nice. What were you up to this morning besides talking to Abs about the weekly plan?
Well, I wake up with I have a 15-year-old who goes to school about a half an hour away. So, getting him up and out is always the morning activity and to school. And then I came back and talked to Abs and then went on Facebook for a while to answer some questions from our community.
Okay. Great. How did you start the Anxiety Sisters? Tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Well, okay, so, I guess the first thing people ask us often is if we are actually biological sisters, and sadly, no, but we're soul sisters. So, and in some senses for us, that's been better. We met in college in the 80s and sort of, we were both struggling with anxiety already at that point in our late teens and early 20s, but we didn't really have a vocabulary that is out there now. I mean, we've come a long way in that 35 years since Mags and I met, in the sense that now people know at least generally what anxiety and depression are, whereas that was just not something that they talked about when we were in college. So Mags and I really bonded over our all of our symptoms, which, she had loads of stomach symptoms, I had the heart symptoms. We really didn't know that it was anxiety. We sort of both figured that we had something really, really wrong with us. But we kind of hung on to each other, and
Mhm.
and we went to our 20s were our decade of the ists. Because we literally spent the entire decade going to every ist that exists. So the nutritionist, the cardiologist, the therapist,
Neurologist,
the neurologist, the past life regressionist.
I was going to say that too. Anyone who would take our money, and who we thought could help us feel better, we sort of gravitated to, and that took us quite a while.
People kept telling us we had anxiety, but like most anxiety sisters, we kind of couldn't believe that anxiety could cause such
so many symptoms.
Physical symptoms. I mean, I kept saying, no. I know what anxiety is. That's when you're nervous. That's when you have butterflies in your stomach. It's not when your heart is racing and you can't breathe. So we had we had many years of being told we had anxiety and doubting it.
Okay. And when were you like embracing it and saying like, yes, we have anxiety, and that all the symptoms are actually connected to anxiety?
I think as we were going about trying to find help, and therapy too, and psychiatrists, and we were going to try to find help, and I think what we realized was that we were each other's touchstones. So we were helping each other a lot. And then professionally, we were each developing. I was going into social work and learning a lot about mental health, and Abbe was in communications, which is such a huge part of sort of how we function in this world, how we speak to ourselves and how we speak to other people, such an important piece. And so we were kind of putting these pieces together, and we were starting to talk to other people. And the more that we started to kind of go around and speak to other people, the more stuff we were putting together, I guess is what I'm saying. And personally and professionally. And Abbe can tell you about this bus ride we went on, but we kind of went on this bus ride that really...
that was the beginning of the anxiety. We were going from New Jersey to Manhattan on this bus, and we were talking too loudly about medications that we were on and their side effects.
Because we're anxiety sisters.
Right, because we're anxiety sisters. And we talk about things other people will whisper about. And the person in the seat in front of us turned around and said, I couldn't help but overhear you. I'm on that same medication. What do you do about that side effect? And literally within 10 minutes, every woman on the bus was turning around, facing us, and we were all talking about these antidepressants and anxiety in general. And we got off the bus and we're walking down 9th Avenue, and I said to Maggie, can you believe how many people were so willing to share such intimate, personal things?
Yeah.
She said, yeah, I can, because anxiety is such a lonely, isolating thing. We're really all anxiety sisters.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, that's brilliant. This is what we need to do. We need to get out there and get that conversation front and center, so that people don't have to suffer like we did, where we, for years didn't really have access to the help that's now available, and we're participating in that. We looked for a community to join. We couldn't find one. So we said, all right, so we'll create this virtual free community. And now we have people, and they're from all over the world, 200 countries and territories. Crazy, people from all around the world, all walks of life, all genders, all religions, all ethnicities, everybody with similar experiences of anxiety. And so we really can prove that anxiety sisters don't go it alone, because we all share that.
Yeah. Wow. That's so powerful. I want to take a step back and kind of start at the beginning. When someone is listening right now and is like, what is anxiety, and how do I know if I am actually experiencing any of those symptoms? How would you describe anxiety today?
Well, here's the thing about anxiety. the symptoms, the physical symptoms, there's such a wide range of physical symptoms. It's like we say anything your body can do, any sound it can make, any fluid, any kind of discomfort you can have. It can be like a Bare aspirin commercial. It can be rashes. It can be stomach issues. So many other things, which is what makes anxiety so tricky, because it is not one of those things where the first day you're like, this must be anxiety, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we tell people, do your due diligence, of course, go to the doctors and make sure that you're ruling out other things, but you come to a place where it turns out that there aren't so many other things causing the symptoms. And,
we should point out that anxiety is a human thing. Everybody experiences anxiety. It's like any other emotion or sensation, right? Anxious is human. Okay, if you're a human being, you felt anxiety. Where it becomes tricky, and when we're talking about anxiety, we're really talking about that biological fight, flight, or freeze response that's happening in your brain, right? It's happening in your amygdala, which is
you talk about amygdala hijack too. Yeah, she does.
It's this little almond-shaped region in your limbic system of your brain that, and actually we have two of them, that sort of acts as an early warning system for your body. So it will sense something, right, from one of your five senses. It'll take in some kind of stimulus, and it will decide if that's something threatening or not. If it is threatening to your amygdala, then it's going to set off that warning, and then your whole body, you start releasing the adrenaline and the cortisol, and then you start getting all the symptoms. So, and that happens to everybody, right? I mean, we all get startled by something, or we all, feel that response of, oh my God, I'm scared, right? Anxiety, though, the kind of anxiety that Mags and I really suffered from, and that, we try to help people with, is when your amygdala gets a little wonky and starts to perceive threats where there may not be threats. So you're standing in the grocery store minding your own business, and suddenly your heart is racing, or you're sweating, or you're starting to get hives, or your stomach is killing you and you feel like you're going to throw up. All these things can be symptoms of the fight, flight, or freeze response, where your brain perceives that there's a real danger to your life. And in anxiety sufferers, our brains are trigger happy. So we perceive danger where it may not even be so dangerous or dangerous at all. And that's when it can take over and become a disorder. And you can stop being able to function fully because this response is happening so often. So that when we talk about anxiety disorder, that's what we're talking about.
We often tell people, if your anxiety is making a decision about what you do, where you go, who you see, if you become so afraid of those symptoms that you sort of shrink your world, then we know that there's a problem, that there's an issue.
Yeah, that's a good red flag. Yeah, it's really interesting. I was diagnosed with anxiety in 2018. And I also had no idea. I always had this feeling in my stomach, how you were saying, and all these different symptoms, but I had no idea what it was until I went to the doctor, and I just didn't feel like myself anymore. And they diagnosed me with anxiety and depression, which is, a form of burnout. And and I was like, wow, the first time someone put kind of a name on what I was experiencing, it was almost so freeing, because I was like, now when I have moments of anxiety, I can better control it almost because of that, because I'm like, oh, this is my anxiety, and that's kind of my signal that I've been doing too much, or I need to take care of myself or do something to kind of bring my fight or flight response back into the parasympathetic nervous system. So I think that's super helpful. And the second question that I have, that I found really interesting, what you were sharing on the bus, was about medication. So what is your stance on medication today? You obviously took medication for anxiety. What was your experience, and what do you tell people to do nowadays with medication?
So I guess you could say our stance is that we are focused on what helps people get back to functioning in their life. That because, for a lot of us, anxiety can really interrupt our lives in many different ways. And so we know that there are a lot of issues with medication, right? There's a lot of there's what we call front and center effects. There's issues with it, but we also know that for some people, it can be life-changing. And so and the two of us each take medication. Some of us need medication to start to do the things to take care of ourselves, right? Some of us need medication just for a little while. Some of us need it for a longer amount of time. It's not a cure-all in any way, but we always say we have all these like techniques that we really believe in and we really use in our lives, and but if you can't get out of your house, or it's nice if I tell you to walk in nature, right? But if you can't get off the couch at all, that's not going to really help you, right? Walking in nature is not so helpful when you can't leave the house, or when you're, or if you can't get in the car to drive somewhere, because your anxiety inhibits you so much, going to therapy becomes a lot harder. Or, if you're right?
Right. And I was going to say, on our general stance is this: anxiety disorder is a medical condition. So for some people, medication is an appropriate part of the treatment plan. We have no judgment about anyone's treatment. In other words, we do both take medication as part of our treatment plans, but we don't think that means everyone should. It's not for everyone, but we also don't believe in judging anyone's choice to be on medication, just in the same way I wouldn't judge somebody for taking blood pressure medication or insulin for their diabetes or any other, when you have a medical condition, sometimes medication is part of the plan. And so what we're really against is that judgment piece. We're not, no one's treatment plan should be judged.
Yeah, for sure. And where does it come from that you have anxiety? I mean, I'm sure that you have explored that wide and large as well.
Very much, very much.
So, like, where does it come from?
Where doesn't it come from?
I mean, there's so many reasons that all of us can have anxiety in this world. But, both of us can trace our anxiety back pretty far. As you said, it's like we didn't have words for it, but we can both really trace it back. We remember being anxious as really young children in different ways. We had different symptoms of that, but, I was a child with a lot of separation anxiety, severe separation anxiety. Abbe had her own struggles as a child with now what she sees as OCD. And so, for us, part of it was coming, from childhood, but there are just, hormones make a difference, especially for women, especially at all times, especially when we're in a lot of fluff.
Especially at all times.
And especially at all times. I was just thinking, but especially after, around childbirth, around menopause, around puberty, there are just, expectations in our society of women play a part. A lot of us feel both.
Vitamin deficiencies. Our soil is really not what it used to be in the 70s. And so we're, most of the population is deficient in magnesium, let's say, and magnesium is a part of a natural control of anxiety in our body. So we're not having enough magnesium. That's one example. Any kind of trauma can cause anxiety. Illnesses can cause anxiety. Medications, including anxiety medications, can cause anxiety.
Yeah.
We always say that trying to figure out your exact cause of your anxiety is a bit like standing in an anthill and trying to figure out which one bit you.
Yeah. Burnout, like you talk about, that burnout, that prolonged stress. And stress and anxiety are a bit different, but when you have prolonged and consistent stress, that really often can lead to an anxiety disorder.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between stress and anxiety?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to, Meg?
No, go ahead.
We're ready. Whose turn is it? So stress and response and the anxiety response come from the same place, right? They're both from the amygdala. They both start with that fight or flight or freeze response that triggers your kidneys to release the adrenaline, etc. So physically, it's very similar. But with stress, you can pinpoint some kind of a cause.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real a cue for it that you can trace. Whereas with anxiety, sometimes we have no idea. Like I said, we could be standing in a line at the grocery store, minding our own business, and then boom, have an anxiety attack.
Mm-hmm.
So that would not be stress. That would be anxiety, where, in other words, where it's hard to figure out necessarily. And stress is something that we all have as human beings, just like we all have anxiety. Yeah, but when we say we all have anxiety, we're probably saying we all have stress.
Yes.
We all have that daily stress. We worry about our health. We worry about our finances. We worry about the world we live in, all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the pressures on us on a daily basis. That's really stress for most people. It can, like Maggie said, become anxiety, and even an anxiety disorder if, you suffer from burnout.
Exactly. I just wanted to say, when you have prolonged levels of stress, then it becomes anxiety or depression or burnout.
Yes.
Like all these different things.
Because when you're, even with stress, your amygdala is going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like any kind of danger, your body is revving up. Mm-hmm. And what happens, particularly if you have stress that either can't be managed or you're not managing for whatever reason, it's like your amygdala is staying in that state of being revved up all the time. And that is basically anxiety disorder. Yeah. So it's,
yeah, for sure. Can we talk for a second about panic attacks? I think I've never really talked about this on my podcast, and I've done over 150 podcast episodes at this point, but I'm like, I don't think I've talked really much about panic attacks. Can you explain that a little bit for people that might have experienced that before and are wondering how to maybe manage that better or get out of panic attacks?
Well, they're a lot of fun. Very joyful.
I would rather clean a fraternity bathroom with a toothbrush after a huge party than have another panic attack.
Yes. It's one of the scariest.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the scariest parts of anxiety, I think. And, basically it's often severe physical symptoms. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit different for different people. So Abbe always says she has the Bayer aspirin symptoms, the Bayer aspirin commercial symptoms, where it feels like there's something wrong with her. They're cardiac symptoms. Mm-hmm. And, I tend to feel like I have a stomach flu when I have the panic attack. So I'm completely nauseous. No food stays down. It's, and then there's, what we call the psychological symptoms, which is really, believing that death is probably imminent, right? Like, often we hear people say, I'm going to die. For some people during panic attacks, they can have this sensation of not being quite in their bodies. It's often called dissociation or depersonalization. Mm-hmm. We call it floating. You're kind of floating up above your body. Mm-hmm. So there's many, many different, symptoms of it, but all of it is one of the most frightening things that I've ever been through. And I think Abbe, anyone who's had a panic attack would say it's one of the most frightening things.
Yeah.
So much so that people, a lot of people become afraid of the actual panic experience. That becomes the loop.
Develop the anxiety. Yeah.
Yeah, that is part of panic disorder, when you start avoiding things because you become afraid. You panic about having another one of those panic attacks because it's like someone torturing you. It's excruciating.
Mm-hmm.
It's really rough.
Yeah.
We do believe in preparing for panic.
What did you say?
I said we do believe in preparing for panic. That's one of our big lines, is that you can take away a lot of panic's power if you can know it's coming. And one way you can know it's coming is if you prepare for it. So one of our favorite techniques we talk about is something called a spin kit, which is our term for a first aid kit for anxiety. Okay. And just like if you have an allergy, you'd carry an EpiPen. So if you have anxiety disorder or panic disorder, you should carry a spin kit. And the types of things that are in a spin kit are things that you can use to help you get through a panic attack or anxiety, such as anything soothing, maybe, like a lavender essential oil or a soft fabric or a worry stone or maybe a mint or something to distract you if you're the kind of person who floats But then Maggie said, then having a strong mint will bring you back into your body. A fidget spinner or some knitting or, pictures of your pets, whatever, kinds of things can soothe you and distract you. Because you can't stop the panic. That's the thing. We want to stop the panic, but we can't. And if we fight against it, we're going to make it worse. So we want to carry things that can distract us during the panic, that we're not trying to make it end. We're just going to say, all right, well, I'm going to focus on this fidget spinner, or I'm going to put in these headphones and listen to this particular piece of music that I love till I can ride this wave of the anxiety until it lets me go. It will let you go. But we really do believe in a spin kit as preparation, because if you're walking around with a spin kit, then you're ready for the panic. You know it's coming. And it enables you to really, no longer if you start to feel panicky, you're not going to say, oh my God, why is this happening? You're going to say, oh, I'm having anxiety. Good thing I have my spin kit. And that really takes away its power because it can't shock you anymore. There's no more sneak attack.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm really curious because you've obviously been in this field for so many years, right? You've experienced it yourself. Now you're working with over 200,000 people and help them with their anxiety. How have you seen the development of anxiety? I mean, obviously that bus experience, it was really interesting because people were not really talking about it, but then you probably had that realization of like, oh, there's actually so many people that have the same experience as us. How has it been over the last few years? Because I feel like, anxiety, depression, mental health is becoming all these buzzwords now, and like it's becoming bigger and bigger. Like, how has that changed, your business or like just the way of how you work with your community?
Well, definitely there's much more of an acknowledgement that, we have this thing called mental health, and some of us have anxiety or depression or other mental health issues. The thing that Abs and I find so much in our community is that while the words anxiety and depression are thrown around a lot, what that actually looks like in the world is still not really discussed. So it's like acceptable to say, oh, I have anxiety, but some of the symptoms that we talk about, people will say, really, I thought I was the only one that had these like out of body experiences, or I thought I was the only one that, hasn't driven in 20 years. Like people don't sort of know what the feelings are. And what we often say is that while it's acceptable to say you have depression or anxiety, if you have to say, I don't know if I could make it someplace, or, I may not be able to do this, or I may not be available for this, people are a lot less tolerant of that. They want you to talk about it, but they don't want it to affect their lives, right? So, I still think that's part of the stigma. It's like if someone has a cast on their leg, we don't expect them to take the stairs. Right. We, no, we have to make sure their elevator is available. We all bring them casseroles and, try to be very attentive. But if someone is saying like, yeah, my anxiety or my depression's really acting up, people tend to pull away, if anything. And they really don't know sort of how to support someone. You don't get casseroles generally.
They don't know how to change their expectations when the illness is invisible.
Yeah, for sure. And I can totally relate to that too. I feel like when I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, I felt super guilty because I felt like, and crazy as well, like honestly, because it's like, okay, I didn't have a broken arm or a broken leg that I could show my team and be like, this is what I have. That's why I'm not coming to work, So yeah, so that's definitely interesting.
I always tell Abby that there's this show I've watched a bunch of times on, I don't know, Showtime or HBO. It's called Wakefield. It's from Australia. And it's about a psychiatric hospital, but one of the nurses is helping this woman with a young baby who's kind of going out into the community. And she said, but I'm so vulnerable out there. No one can see how much I'm struggling, and I have this baby with me. And so he gave her sort of a boot to put on her foot, like if your foot's hurt. And, she goes out into the community and people are like, let me help you. Let me open the door. Let's get you a good seat. Do you need some help with the baby? Because people wanted to be supportive, but she needed something outward to show. It's like, I'm vulnerable. I need some help.
Yeah.
I think is that something that people ask for that, It's still hard, especially for confident women.
Yeah.
Right? Because we all totally get that guilt of, oh my goodness, how can I not show up to work or to soccer practice or to, the bake sale or whatever it is that we're doing in our lives? How can we not do that because of anxiety? It's almost like we don't have permission to. And so part of what Mags and I do is try to help people be compassionate with themselves and give themselves permission to ask for help.
Yeah. So to communicate basically what you need and to ask for permission from the community. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. And what about men? Do men have less anxiety than women?
No, we think it comes out very differently in men. First of all, we are very practiced in talking about feelings, right? Like little girls spend time brushing, not all of them, but we spend time in interpersonal relationship, and often, not always, but often boys do less of that. So we're very practiced in talking about emotions, but we think with men, there's a lot of substance abuse. There's a lot of anger, aggression, sort of hiding behind a job or, so I think it looks different in men. I'm really convinced men have a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure on them, but it sort of is not as recognized.
And more than 30% of our community identify as male. So we definitely know that men are affected by anxiety, but like Mag said, they don't necessarily know that it's anxiety. So like we've talked to anxiety brothers who will say things like, oh no, I don't have anxiety, but when I get home, as long as I have a couple glasses of wine, then, as long as I pour my martini, then I'm okay. So that, that's their anxiety medicine.
Yeah.
I don't see it anyway. I think that men are socialized to achieve still, even though we're trying so hard to level the playing field as much as possible. And we've come a long way. There's still that societal pressure for men to achieve, for women to nurture. That's still very much part of our code in Western culture. So I think that the response to that is that it's easier for women to be able to express that they're feeling that than it is for men who are expected to be these achievers.
Yeah.
Who don't get mired down in emotions, which are still unfortunately considered the purview of females.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I feel like maybe men have also that societal pressure to have to be the high achiever. But I think a lot of women also have that expectations now on themselves to deliver, right? Because I work with peak performers and high achievers all the time. And I know that it's a really intrinsic thing. Like nobody else has ever expected that from my family, that I'm, that I deliver and that I make a lot of money or anything like that, but I've just put that pressure on myself and created anxiety in that way.
The difference is I agree. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I'm sorry, but I think
okay.
The difference is that women, yes, the women have all this pressure now to achieve and make a lot of money that men do, but they're also at the same time really judged about motherhood. For example, or being a good daughter or being a really good friend,
relationship building.
Yeah. Relationship building and also how they look, and making sure that they look great and are, a certain weight and so women are sort of expected to be the whole package. Whereas I think, yes, men are paying more attention to their parts in relationships, but I still hear people when a woman is really successful professionally kind of saying, well, what does the rest of her life look like? There's still that expectation. She's supposed to be perfect in all areas. And who can do that?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, we can't.
How about teens? I saw that you mentioned that in your interview guide as well. I'm curious about that. How about teens? I know that when I started my business, it became really quickly apparent to me that, those kind of peak performance kind of characteristics that I explain are oftentimes already developed in your younger years, right? In high school and in college. And a lot of people, I've done a few different workshops and talks at companies and campuses, and when I talk to those kids, I'm always like amazed, because first of all, I'm amazed because they're already having way more education and awareness around mental health and anxiety and depression and burnouts. And then at the same time, I'm like, wow, it's were we like that too? But was I when I was in college? And for sure there was definitely a lot of anxiety and pressure and stress that we that came from the external world, but we also put on ourselves. But how does that reflect in your own community, and how are they dealing with anxiety? Is that different?
Well, they're my favorite population. I don't know about Abs, but
yes, of course, I was a college professor. They're my most
well, they're both our favorite kind of sort of age group to work. We love working with teens, and and I think this is partly a socioeconomic and cultural issues, but all teens have a lot of stress on them. It's just like where the achievement is put. So, I mean, I think that a lot of teens have extraordinary stresses, both like, there's a bunch of teens who have stress to get into the right college, get into the right university, do all these extracurricular activities. And I have a son applying to university right now. And so I'm on all these parent groups on Facebook, and we're talking about it. And people, are like, my kid has a 4.0 GPA and they did this, and this, and they didn't get into this college, and they are devastated. And you can actually see like, no, I think the devastation is also, I think you're also devastated that your child didn't get into such and such college.
Of course. Yeah.
These incredible expectations.
Another thing that's important to say about teens is, you were talking about teen anxiety, and do we see a lot of it? Yes, we see a lot of it. And now we really understand neuroscience better than we did. It used to be believed 20 years ago, the field of neuroscience believed that teen brains were just a little smaller than adult brains, but basically adult brains, right? Now we know that's just not the case, that teen brains are very different. In fact, pre-adult, we call them pre-adult brains, because most brains are not fully developed and wired until at least the age of 25, and for some people as late as 30. But certainly 25 is the earliest that you're going to be hooked up fully and have everything connected to each other and working in the brain. So what we know is that there's very different dopamine receptors in a teen brain. So there's more availability of dopamine to them, and that's why they tend to maybe chase after quote unquote highs, whether it be from taking risks or from trying substances or whatever. In other words, that's something in their brain that's different from the adult brain. Also, their prefrontal cortex, right, which is right here behind your forehead, basically, that's where your seat of executive function is, right? That's where we learn how to organize, plan, evaluate consequences, make decisions. That's really where all the real cognitive work is done, right here. And really for the pre-adult brain, that region is not fully wired. It is not fully hooked up to the rest of the brain. So, there's a lot of disconnect. For younger people, they have a harder time with executive function because they're not fully wired. It's like the Wi-Fi is spotty until you're 25. Do you know what I mean? Like things go in and out. So if you're wondering why when you were 23, you might have, jumped off your neighbor's roof into your pool, you can't figure out how you ever would have come up with it. Well, now you know. Because your brain, your impulsivity was different. It really was different as a pre-adult than it is as an adult. We are much more capable after age 25 of assessing and evaluating and looking at consequences. So a lot of the anxiety behaviors that we see in teens come in the form of impulsivity and chasing the dopamine, and and that's something that has to do with brain chemistry and with neuroscience.
And because of that, teens are also much more susceptible to becoming addicted. So it's like not just drugs and alcohol, but it's like the gambling online, is a big issue for a lot of teens.
Gaming.
Even just addicted to gaming or the internet. Anything that gives you that dopamine rush, teens are a lot more vulnerable to. But I think, as adults, it's probably our responsibility to not just watch our teens, but to be really careful about the kind of expectations that we're putting on them to perform a certain way or be a certain way. To spend more time cultivating maybe their strengths rather than what we need for ourselves as adults, which I think is often confusing when you're a parent.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked already about the spin kit, right? Kind of that preparation that you have when you know that you are suffering from anxiety or panic attacks. I know that you also talk about kind of a 3-step approach to managing anxiety. What is that? Can you tell us a little bit more about what the 3 steps are?
Are you talking about our secret sauce with 3 ingredients? Yes. Okay. So we believe that managing anxiety and ultimately living a richer, fuller life or a happier life comes from 3 things. It comes from acceptance, then agency, and then connection. Those 3 ingredients, that's our secret sauce. And of course, when Mags and I think of secret sauce, it looks like chocolate suspiciously. But in any case, but it's really important in terms of acceptance to, with anxiety, we don't really, for most people, there's no such thing as recovery or complete, remission. Anxiety is a condition. And for most of us, not all of us, but for most of us, we're going to live with it our whole lives. Mags and I, despite the fact that we run this community and that we've done all this research and we've written a book and and we do these podcasts and we're experts in the field of anxiety, and yet we're still anxiety sisters. And there's still certain days where we'll say to each other, "You think this is anxiety, or should I be going to the doctor?" It's like that happens because we're still anxiety sufferers. That it's a condition. So I think there has to be some acceptance of that. There has to be a real sort of an embracing of it and saying, "Hey, my brand of happy is going to be anxiously happy." This is how my brain works. I have a wonky amygdala that's going to find threats in places where maybe other people wouldn't find threats. I have to know that about myself. I have to know that, certain, like, I have obsessions and compulsions that I deal with in my life, and I have to work around them. And they're there. And I think that acceptance piece is really, really important, as well as, having agency or having some sense of control over your own decisions. Mags and I are real believers in it's okay if you have anxiety, but don't let it drive. You're the driver. I wake up in the morning, and if I'm feeling anxious, I will literally say out loud, "Okay, you're here. Fine. I'm driving." So that I am making my own decisions about where I'll go, who I'll see, and what I'll do. I'm not gonna let anxiety do that. And when I say let, I'm not saying it's an easy thing at all. It's not like, oh, I'm permitting it. But I'm gonna really fight to manage my decisions, because that way I'll keep my world from shrinking. And that agency is what allows us to live fuller lives, because, we get to make our own choices, and that's so freeing and so powerful. And then finally, connection. We human beings are social. We are a social species. We need one another. And so Mags and I are huge fans in connect in any way you can. Increase your connection. It doesn't even have to be intimate. You can connect by waving to the person who's taking care of your garbage. Wave to the garbage people. Wave. Chat with your barista at Starbucks who's making your coffee. Say hello to the person on the subway next to you. Those little connections take us so far, and they really help ease our sense of being alone. And anxiety is so lonely.
And research shows us time and time again that social connection, whether it's loose or strong, right? Whether it's intimate or sort of those that knowing the people in your stores or whatever, that social connection helps us get past really hard times. It helps our resilience tremendously. It helps our sense of feeling that our life is meaningful. It helps our happiness. So we really believe deeply.
Yeah. And you obviously show it with your big community, right? And so when did you start writing your book?
in
Well,
2010.
we
Anybody who thinks you can write a book in a few weeks and get it, that's what we thought. Oh, we'll write our book.
well, we are sort of book people, I would say. That is our, when we have a problem, we go to the books, still. And so when we went looking for anxiety books, when we were really struggling, we found ourselves getting more anxious every time we opened an anxiety book. And we found the prescriptive nature of a lot of the books very triggering, because, I went through a period where I couldn't eat and nothing would stay down. And so telling me to eat 5 fruits and vegetables a day, I know that is good for you, but it wasn't very helpful. So we both, I remember walking into the Barnes and Noble with Abby, and we were in there, and she said to me, "Oh my God, I got to leave. I got to take an Ativan," after we were in the anxiety section, because it was so anxiety provoking. So
this workbook.
we really,
it was so it had a list of everything that you were supposed to do. And I thought, oh God, I can't do those things. So,
right.
so when we said, there's so many books on anxiety out there, what can we contribute that would be different? And the first thing we both said is, well, for one thing, we're not going to should all over people. We're not going to tell them what they should be doing, because that really creates so much anxiety, especially if you're really having a hard time functioning. If right now anxiety is making your decisions, it's awfully hard to, do some online yoga or to, even though that's a great way to manage your anxiety, once you get that out of that fight or flight, that's a great way to manage anxiety. And we both really appreciate that. But, I remember doctors telling me to do really intense cardiovascular exercise to release endorphins. And I was like, my heart rate is so fast and I'm sweating and I'm flushed. I can't sweat any more than I'm already sweating. So the first thing we said was that, we're going to write a book that doesn't tell people what they should be doing, because anxiety sisters often feel like failures anyway. We don't want to add to that sense of shame. And then we said, and also we know that one size doesn't fit all. In fact, one size may not fit the same person 2 days in a row. So we need an arsenal of strategies and techniques. We need tons of options for people. So we knew that right off the bat. And that's, we started writing the book really with those things in mind.
And also that we were going to explain as much as we could in a very accessible way some of the research and some of the neuroscience. Abby became really interested in that piece, but we were going to do it in a way that was extremely accessible for everyone, because that's part of the acceptance, is understanding what's going on.
100%.
Yeah, you found that too.
I mean, again, because I feel like, because I work with peak performers, I almost feel like they need to feed that brainy part of their lives to be like, okay, that's why I'm doing this, then it has more substance to kind of take the next step and really believe in what you're saying, right? Because I think you can say a lot of things, but if you don't really understand it, then it might not be as powerful to follow.
It also takes away the shame, right? Because we think we're at fault because of our anxiety disorders. And when you start to see what's going on in the brain and in the body and the chemicals, then suddenly you're saying to yourself, oh, this is a disorder. This isn't my fault. I'm not weak. I'm not lazy. There's nothing wrong with my personality. This is a disorder, not a decision.
Yeah. And it is what a lot of people experience, and I'm not alone in this. I think for sure helps. When did your book come out?
Came out.
It was published?
Yes, September.
By Penguin Random House in September of 2021. It's called The Anxiety Sisters Survival Guide.
Wonderful.
How you can become more
hopeful, connected, and happy.
Hopeful, connected, and happy. Yep. And so you can get it anywhere that you buy books,
but it really did take a long time to write. And to answer your question, it took almost 10 years to write. Because we were doing so much research. We interviewed thousands of people over the years. We started out with only interviewing a few hundred for the book, and then through our podcast, we got access to a lot of experts in different fields, neuroscientists, and, before we knew it, and then also people all over the world were joining our community. So we had this huge ethnography of the anxiety experience, both from the researcher's perspective and from the sufferer's perspective. So we tried to bridge that because, we're in both. We're and the experts. So we want to bring it together and make it something really understandable for people.
Yeah. And I love that because, as you were saying, because everyone is so individual and so different, you need a ton of different strategies. And so I'm very excited to look through the book as well and to see what other strategies are out there, because I'm sure that you've seen. Do you have any like surprising strategies that you've heard over the years where you were like, oh, this is working for this person for like managing anxiety?
One thing that definitely it doesn't surprise me because I have degrees in communication and I understand the power of talk and self-talk, but a lot of our people that we work with are very surprised by how much that helps, because really the research has shown that the most powerful voice in your own head is your own. And so if your brain can hear and your ears can hear you saying out loud that you're going to be okay, it immediately reverses that sympathetic response. It puts you into that rest and digest very quickly because, it's like your brain.
You're hearing yourself.
So we tell people, and then at first they look at us like we're completely nuts. And we say to them, okay, so you have to find a mantra that works for you, or some kind of a saying or something soothing. It can be anything. It could be one word. It could be the name of someone that you love. It could be a saying. We love "this too shall pass" because, like all human emotions, anxiety too will pass. So we love that one. Or a gentle command like breathe in, breathe out. That's one I use a lot. But what we say to ourselves out loud is so powerful. So that one tends to surprise a lot of people. And then they'll write us and say, oh my God, I started doing that self-talk thing. I will never stop. It really works.
Yeah.
And it does.
I think also that idea that you said before, which is that just that connection. Abby and I, the thing that always surprises us is that for all that we talk about anxiety, all of us, we still get people almost daily saying, oh, that's anxiety. I never knew what that was. So we have this blog of like burping and farting and making other bodily noises are often a sign of anxiety. And because of how the air is coming in and going out, right? And so people say, oh, that's what that is. But that they can say that for just about anything that we talk about. Someone gets this revelation like, oh, this thing was always happening to me, but I didn't know what it was or why it was happening. And not only that, but I'm not alone in this. Like this happens to 30 other people are commenting and saying, yeah, me too. This happens to me also.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
It's so powerful.
We do this Tuesday night book group on Facebook Live. It's free. And, we have people, they come to the club every Tuesday night at 7:00 Eastern time. And so your listeners are invited to join us anytime. We go through one chapter of the book a week, and we try to pick out something that we think is really salient and go into even more detail. So there's some new content too. And, we always get a kick out of the comments. How many people go, oh my gosh, that's a thing. That's a thing. Everybody says that's a thing. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought that was just me.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so now that you've published your book, finally, which is so exciting, and you have such a huge community, what are you planning to do next? Like how do you see your journey evolve and go?
Well, I guess, we'd like to write another book.
Okay.
We'd like to take over the world. No, we
No, we wouldn't. We really would not.
No, we really would not. That's true. I think that, the dream would be to be able to have a foundation at some point so that we could get some help to people who don't have access to mental health care. We really, we understand the effects of living in this culture with this healthcare system and what that means for people who battle brain disorders like anxiety and depression. And so I think we would love to help in a very grassroots way.
Yeah.
And then maybe even to be part of the public policy conversation in that on some level. But I think we still want to just reach more and more and more people, help people get rid of that blame and shame.
Yeah.
Get the we want to be part of that conversation, but we also want to make sure that in places, in cities, there's more conversation than in rural areas. So we'd like to get the word out everywhere that you are not alone. And that there is treatment out there for anxiety. There's all kinds of ways to manage it, both with medicine, without medicine. There's lots of ways, and we can help you with that. So I don't know. What else do we want to do, Max? I want to give a TED talk.
We also have a podcast that we put a lot of time into called The Spin Cycle with the Anxiety Sisters, where sometimes it's just the two of us talking, and sometimes we have different people with expertise in areas of anxiety or mental health talking to us. So we love that. And we also have, right now we have a small support group, like a private support group that we have just started running. So we're kind of, any way we can reach people and help them is sort of what we want to do.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, I had a huge pleasure talking to you too. And I feel like there's so much more we could talk about, but I would love to leave it at that today. And if people are listening and if they have more questions about anxiety, they can either reach out to me and we'll schedule another podcast episode and interview, and we'll talk more about maybe more details and more questions that people have about anxiety. But obviously they can also come to you and to your Facebook community, to the Anxiety Sisters, or get the book. There's a lot of different ways to get in touch with Max and Abbe. So for now, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise, and for just being super authentic and open about this experience, because I obviously know it myself, and I wish I would have had access to that kind of insight when I was going through it. So I think it's always so powerful to see that we're all working on these little different pieces together in order to elevate the human experience and just help people feel better. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. It's so wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you.